Coming up on podcast 1641, we ask, are used EVs getting a little bit cheaper? Stick around, we'll find out on the show today. Also coming up, the baby Volvo EX30, an electric sporty two-seater Caterham, and why Panasonic are about to start building in the US more battery facilities. Those stories and a lot more coming up on today's podcast. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're listening in the world. It's EV News Daily, your trusted source of EV information for the first of the month, Tuesday, 1st of November. My name is Martin Lee, and I go through every EV story, so you don't have to. We'll start with some news coming from Car Dealer magazine, picked up by Teslarati, but a UK magazine, pointing out in a YouTube video they made, about 10-minute long video. You can go watch this. They say used vehicle prices dropping about 0.5% in October. But on yesterday's podcast, you may remember we talked about the German story where they were seeing thousands of euros off Teslas in the last month in the used market. Well, this article says that while some vehicles are doing just fine, once again, Tesla's Model 3 saw used prices drop by a notable degree, 5.9% of their used value in a month alone. Not great news if you're trying to sell your car right now, at about £2,100 off the average Model 3 in the course of the last month. But good news, I suppose, if you're trying to buy one at the moment. Why is that? Well, I had a look on Tesla's website before I came on air today, and if I want a Model Y, I can take delivery in November. It's now November. So that's at some time in the next 29 days, which is very, very different to how it was. Obviously, those cars, the non-performance Model Y is built in China, in Shanghai, and so they'll be on a boat by now, almost in the UK, and they won't be assigned to anyone. So those cars will be built. Tesla will think, well, we needed to build this many of this spec, and they just haven't fulfilled that. Now, the performance, I think, is being built in Berlin, from what I understand. I'll have to confirm that. Next in the news, Toyota. They're profit plunging 25% on chip shortages and surging costs. Although, don't get me wrong, Toyota's still massively profitable. And that's what we're trying to work out today. Well, exactly how profitable, despite the yen's 32-year low, how much money is Toyota making? Well, they said that because of supply chain issues, supply constraints and chip shortages, that their profits were down. But they have been making a ton of money. So why would they go electric? I've been harder than most on Toyota, saying that their whole plan, which is to diss plug-ins and to promote their hybrids, was always very short term, because at some point they were going to need to stop running attack ads on electric vehicles and telling people, we choose not to plug in. They're going to have to say, well, we choose to plug in. However, when you think of it from their side, is actually they've been doing absolutely fine. Thank you very much. A record net profit of $19.7 billion for the year up to March of this year. So yes, down 25% on Q3. But if all is going well, why would they blow up the ship to make electric vehicles? And in Japan as well, the world's third largest car market, 1% of new cars are EVs. Germany's 26%, Norway's over 90%. So again, they're probably looking around being like, well, we know what the world global data is telling us, but there's no hurry here. But I would suggest, Toyota, now you are dangerously behind in terms of losing market share, at least of the EV market. I'm sure they can catch up. They've got some good people working there. I don't think the board are always necessarily on it in terms of EVs, but if the engineers are let loose, I'm sure they can make a good one. BZ4X, their first one. BZ3, Chinese EV, don't really rate yet, but we'll see what they come out with. Now let's talk about cars that I do rate, and that's Volvo's offering. The EX30 is going to be a baby Volvo. 273 miles of range, sitting beneath the Volvo the XC40. Now, the EX is going to be the new naming convention they give to their cars. The CEO, Håkan Samuelsson, confirming that the EX90 is going to be coming first. That's their flagship model. And then the EX30, sitting on parent company Geely's SEA architecture and hopefully giving a pretty decent price. Look, Volvo are never going to be a value play, but the XC40 Recharge and the Polestar as well, both very premium pricing, but very, very premium vehicles. So something a little bit in more of the mainstream can't hurt. No clue of when that arrives. As for an electric Caterham, well, Caterhams are all about, they make 500 of them a year, and they sold slightly more last year, so they've got a bit of a waiting list. But that's all about lightweight sports car fun. And when even they're talking about going electric, you know something's happening, right? So I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon with current technology, because they say they've got no interest in putting a 1,000-kilogram car on the road. But as soon as 2026, they think it could be unveiled an electric version of the Caterham 7 plus an all-new vehicle as well. But Caterham customers might want a track day of these cars, and they want lightness, simplicity, agility and performance, according to this article in autocar.co.uk. They write that the new car Caterham are working on will be prettier and more modern than the 7, and those will be big points of distinction, maybe even having a roof. They say it'll be designed as a pure EV from the start. The battery, I would think, is going to be for Caterham the big technology that they're waiting on, because if they can do a 750-kilo track car that can do 20 minutes of hot laps, come in, recharge quickly, and then go out again. So maybe you're looking at semi-solid state batteries or some battery technology that isn't quite out there yet. But also, small-scale manufacturer can probably charge a premium and people will pay it. People love Caterham if you are into those kind of track day cars. Now, an electric Jeep conversion from Stellantis kicking off its SEMA reveals. There's some other bits and bobs which are a bit more oily, but the electric stuff is a gorgeous resto mod. Started out as a CJ SUV, and now it has an electric motor, 2-speed, 4-wheel drive transfer case, according to this article in autoblog.com. But what's interesting, they say, is that this could be a proof of concept. This could be them exploring what would go into some sort of EV conversion kit, an E-crate drop-in kit, if you like, and, for Jeep conversions to keep them on the road and have EV power. I mean, that would be amazing. Now, according to Inside EVs, Rivian are postponing deliveries of the big battery trucks and the quad motors as well. So if you want the absolute top of the shop Rivian R1T, waiting a little bit longer for that. It's the Max Pack, which won't be coming until 2024. But if you think that you'll have to make do with just the large pack, well, that is still pretty chunky at 135 kilowatt hours. I don't even know if they've said what the exact kilowatt hours of the Max Pack are, but it'll do 400 miles, EPA. They say that's the target, versus 314 for the current vehicle. Now, Panasonic are going to start building this month in November their Kansas battery plant, announcing yesterday on Monday the mass production will begin in 2025, spending billions on this facility, by the way, that will make 30 gigawatt hours of batteries a year, making cylindrical cells like the big AA's, the form factor, the 2170s that you'll find in Model 3s and Model Ys, and creating 4,000 jobs with a $4 billion investment. Panasonic saying that they could even introduce the 4680 battery format, which Tesla is so fond on. Who will Panasonic supply from this facility? Well, we know that Tesla are one of their customers, but others will be taking the cylindrical formats, the 46XX, if you like, different heights of those. BMW, one of those, so we'll wait and see if perhaps a future agreement can be made there. Now, in the UK, Gridserve, builders of the electric forecourts. I love these. I love the one in Braintree. Got a bazillion chargers. I've just been to the one in Norwich and East Anglia. Also, I'm from East Anglia, so it's nice to go home and plug in at home. And it's nice turning up somewhere. There's always going to be a charger. It's clean, it's tidy, it's quick. There's a WH Smith's, there's a Costa, meeting rooms you can book, cars you can look around in their showroom. Fabulous, fabulous facilities. And Gridserve putting in ABB's new 360 kilowatt charger, can charge 4 EVs at once. And the CEO, previous guest of this podcast, Toddington Harper, saying that it's fantastic to have that charger, which will enable pull-through charging. He said some of the driver feedback was from customers towing, and so this can you can have pull-ups in various places of this ABB charger, 4 at the same time. CCS, CHAdeMO, AC plugs. You choose as you're ordering it what is going to be best for your charging network. The cables are 5 meters long. It's got plug and charge, and good for fleets as well. I'll pop a link to those stories in the show notes. Right, coming up on the podcast very soon, we'll be talking about a very new cheap MG. But you won't be able to buy it, and I'll tell you why. Stick around, that's on the way. All right, now let's talk about a big US company called Fleet Advantage. They manage 14,000 articulated lorries in their fleet. Just bought the first 200 Class 8 electric heavy-duty trucks to, I imagine, add them to their fleet and start working out how this whole move to electric is going to go. Let me tell you how I think this will play out. They'll add 200 of them. They or their clients will run the numbers, realize they're nicer to drive, quicker, more efficient. You can charge them at depots, and there'll be more infrastructure, megawatt charging stations coming, and the numbers add up. And I think there'll be more orders coming in, and pretty soon it'll be a backlog once again with commercial vehicles. That's my prediction, at least. I think once that transition starts to happen, it'll happen really quickly. Let's go to India next, where MG has spoken about their plans for affordable cars in India. Now, here in Europe, we've got things like the MG4 just launching, the MG5 facelift, MG ZS EV, the Iron, mighty MG, and but we won't be getting this one. This is the MG Air for the Indian market. 2-door, 4-seater. Well, I mean, there's 2 seats in the back, but 3 meters long, 2 meter wheelbase, 25 kilowatt hour battery, which will do 150 kilometers and a 40 horsepower motor. But that's not really the point of this vehicle, is it? It's not about range. It's about doing those journeys that you want to do around the city. And if you heard yesterday's podcast where we talked about the air quality in New Delhi and the importance of cleaning up the air, whether it's through scooters, 2-wheelers, 3-wheelers, small city cars, it's vitally important to the health of people who can only afford to live where they're living. And all of these stories are wonderful and great. You and I can't buy this car unless you're in India, but hopefully it will be popular. Now, let's talk about 2 wheels. And 2 wheels in India, electric 2-wheeler registrations last month in October. It's only the first of the month, and the October numbers are out. Well done, them. It's good to know that 68,000 pure electric bikes were sold last month. That was up to the 30th of October, which is 29% up over the previous month. That's brilliant. That's another 68,000 clean green electric bikes on sale in India, on the road. And that is such fantastic news. We'll keep an eye on things like this. They call it an inflection point for the industry. This will inspire more companies to start up and bring more vehicles to market. We talk a lot about, on this podcast, we are very focused on US, Europe, and a bit of China and stuff as well. We talk about cars a lot, and the sexy cars and the aspirational cars and stuff like that. But actually in places like India, to get 2-wheel electric power is just, places like Cuba as well, just so important. And, with a stable enough electricity grid, or even some generation, some renewable generation perhaps, that changes so much for people and their mobility. Now, in Korea, the battery makers there anticipate opportunities in Europe, the likes of LG building in Poland, SK building in Hungary, and Samsung SDI building 2 more battery plants in Hungary as well. But they're saying that with the European Union, and that was 2 days ago, I gave you that news perhaps, putting into, it's not quite law yet, but there'll be no other negotiations now. 2035 will be when, if you want to register a vehicle on the roads here, it'll have to be 0 emissions, whatever that technology is. It'll be electric, let's face it, but they were tech agnostic, but it's a reduction of CO2 is technically what they've done. They haven't said we're pro-EV, they've said, well, we're anti-CO2. So that's how the regulators have done it. The Chinese EV battery makers also will be focusing on Europe because they can't focus on the US. The Inflation Reduction Act will mean that Chinese EV battery makers not welcome. And so, it'll heat up in Europe. Competition heats up. That's more batteries. That's more vehicles on the road. That's more of the cars that you and I want to buy. But what about what goes into the batteries? Well, a story here that says 30 miles east of Nevada is a startup developing a factory to unlock lithium. Lilac Solutions makes small white beads. It almost sounds like magical beads, doesn't it? And I want to find out more about this. But they will extract lithium from salty water, or the brines. And that is an important move, because the way that at the minute that lithium is mined is normally on large open mines, very, very water intensive. And then it's a long process as well that these massive brine mines in South America can take up to 18 months to produce lithium through solar evaporation, whereas the US at the minute is making 1% of the world's lithium. China, Argentina, Chile, 90%. So this is a domestic US supply chain in its infancy if this comes off. This article says the global demand for lithium will rise from 500,000 metric tons last year to up to 4 million metric tons by 2030. And so this technology could be a way of unlocking a domestic lithium industry. I'll pop a link to greenbiz.com article in the show notes if you'd like to read more about that. Check out the recent podcast interview with Andrej Karpathy, former head of AI for Tesla's autopilot, who left on a chance to travel the world, which is how all people leave Tesla, isn't it? To spend time with their family. And it was obvious he was never coming back. And he's never coming back. But he hasn't ruled it out. He said he might come back to work on things like special projects. But he was giving details on why they went vision only at Tesla, saying that sensors cost more money. And actually add to system cost as well. That Elon's philosophy is the best part is no part. So they got rid of the radar and all the other sensors and went vision only. He says that it should be sufficient and sensors change as parts change or become unavailable. And you have to change the software. And so that's why they went vision only. I wonder how much of the parts shortage played a part in Tesla removing everything apart from cameras. And I wonder what the cost implication was. I've seen estimates of between $120 and $160 per car for those sensors. I'd rather pay that and have more, but by the sounds of it, coding it is, coding FSD Beta is going to be a mammoth task, and they chose to go vision only. Even with ultrasonics, I have bad experiences with phantom braking recently at low speed. High speed, faultless. Just amazing. But anything 30, 32, 28 miles an hour this time of year, the sun is low in the sky, lots of shadows on the road. And in the Model Y from my buddy Richard at RSEV that I've been borrowing, it does not cope well. Work to be done, I would say. I have to be pretty quick on the accelerator not to have someone ram into the back of me. Right, let's talk a little bit about how our next story, an Australian EV conversion startup is merging with a UK firm, and this will be a way of keeping vehicles on the road for longer. The Melbourne-based Jaunt Motors joining up with Zero EV. Their markets will be Australia, the UK and the US as well. And this new joint company will provide mechanics and enthusiasts with, according to the founder Chris Hazel, the technology, tools and training to be part of a growing global demand for electrification. And I have been very closely watching VinFast from Vin Group and thinking, I think they might do this. Now, bringing a new EV to the market is fabulously difficult. See Rivian, Lucid, etc. But to do it from a name that nobody knows and want to sell in subscription models to the US is brave. Let's use that word. And so let's see what VinFast can do. But they've announced a deal with CATL to use CATL's skateboard chassis product, their cell-to-pack technology as well, and to explore together how they'll expand into global markets. And so that to me just looks like, again, VinFast are doing all the right things and making all the right moves. I hope they make it. I like the vehicles, but nothing on sale yet. We'll wait and see. Hey, that's your podcast for today. Thank you so much for watching the YouTube version. Remember, you can subscribe on your favourite audio platforms, whatever your podcast app of choice is. Apple or Google or Spotify or another app. Just search EV News Daily and get the audio version, which is a bit longer. It's a bit more chatty, and the video version a bit shorter. And there's also EV News Briefly, which is the news in 4 minutes on audio versions as well, if you haven't got too much time in your day. You can support the show on Patreon if you want to at patreon.com/EV News Daily. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. And remember, there's no such thing as a self-charging hybrid.